In this video, I'll scratch build a Doom Diver Catapult for the Orcs and Goblin tribes of Warhammer the Old World. If you've ever looked at a Warhammer war machine and thought, that's just a bunch of wood, I could build one of those at a fraction of the cost, then this video is for you. A Doom Diver Catapult is essentially a giant slingshot that fires a goblin with a big metal spike on its head, hurtling through the air in an attempt to turn both ammunition and target into chop suey. Once launched, the Doom Diver will try to steer towards his target using a set of ramshackle wings. Games Workshop currently sells two versions of this miniature, one for the Old World and one for Age of Sigmar. While this video guide could be useful for either game, we'll focus on the design used for the Old World. The first thing I like to do when building, converting, or kit bashing a miniature is to do a bit of research into its past. I have a pretty deep collection of Orcs and Goblins army books, so I review the lore, miniatures, and artwork for past iterations of the unit. I've always really liked this old Doom Diver illustration by Mark Gibbons. The army of Orcs and Goblins, for which I am building this war machine, stretches all the way back to 4th edition. My brother started Orcs and Goblins using a bunch of HeroQuest orcs and slowly added to it. One of the things he added was a set of the original Doom Diver Catapult models. These models were pretty simple, and when the newer model came along, I always told myself that one day I would just build a couple of slingshots from balsa wood and use the existing Doom Diver models with them. My plan is to combine design elements from the various versions of this miniature to create something a bit unique, but that will still ultimately read as a Doom Diver. For example, I prefer my war machines to have wheels, so I plan to incorporate those in my build. I've got a lot of options for wheels, but if you don't have any such bits in your bits box, there are cheaper alternatives out there. I recently bought this huge container of buttons for $5 at Dollarama. I sort through it and find some matching buttons that I think will work well for this project. Just sorting through all these buttons has given me a couple of cool hobby ideas that I'll probably use in future projects. We'll primarily need some balsa wood, and having a whole bunch of other wood pieces can't hurt. I've got some coffee stir sticks, popsicle sticks, garden stakes, and thin wooden dowel rods. The Doom Diver Catapult uses a 50 by 75mm base in the Old World, so I measure out a sheet of this garden stake as a base, and I cut them to about 7 centimeters. Since I want my catapults to be on wheels, this wooden base will provide a platform for me to build upon. If you know anyone who has built an Ogre Iron Blaster kit, they'll have all these extras that make up the Gnoblar scrap launcher, including these elastic bands and a bunch of Gnoblars. I grabbed a bunch of these bits while at Adepticon this year for just a few dollars. Next, I take my balsa wood and cut some strips of equal length and size. I use my knife to distress them a bit and give them some texture. I line up the pieces of wood, dry fitting them to the wooden base while contemplating how I plan to construct the shape of the catapult. I use some Gorilla wood glue to begin to affix my balsa wood to the base. For the ramp, I cut up some coffee stir sticks. The balsa wood that I have isn't quite thick enough to serve as the two main pieces of timber that make up the tines of the slingshot. So I trim multiple pieces of balsa and combine them with wood glue until I'm happy with the new thickness. I again use wood glue for attaching these to the wooden base. I cut the timber on an angle so when that glues, the two stakes are in roughly a V shape. The next thing I need to do is work on both the ladder at the front of the war machine and the wooden planks on which the ramp will sit. I need to ensure that the ramps I've made will be able to sit between the gap in the stakes. I add a few pieces of balsa wood until I am satisfied with how the ramp is sitting. After that, I tackle the ladder, cutting wood pieces and balsa wood of various sizes until I get a good fit. I trim more pieces of wood, being sure to cut with the grain to create these ladder rungs. At this point, I am feeling pretty well finished with the wood elements of the catapult. I break for the evening to give the glue ample time to set. Throughout the build, I use my files and Dremel to trim and sand the edges of the wooden components. The next stage will be constructing all the metal elements. I cut some strips of thin plastic card to use as metal brackets and, using superglue applied with some wire, attach them in places where the different beams of timber meet. For the large brackets on the stakes, I attempted to just score and bend some plastic card around them, but they broke in some places while doing this. I just glued them in place anyways, and I plan to tidy them up later. Don't be too discouraged by things like this. Greenskin war machines are meant to be somewhat improvised and ramshackle, so you can lean into that in some instances. To make some bolts for the brackets, I cut up a plastic spear that I have kicking around in my bits box, but any plastic rod will do. When gluing something this small, it can help to apply the glue using a toothpick or some metal wire. This prevents you from getting too much glue on the model and gives you a bit more control over where it gets placed. Rather than try to manipulate the bolts with my hands, I use a sharp implement to stab the center of the plastic, which is usually just enough to be able to pick them up. I can then more easily ensure a good placement over the glue. I affix several bolts in this way. To fix up the metal clasps, I intend to use some sprue goo, which is something I've never made or used before. So I add snippets of sprue to a bottle of Tamiya extra thin plastic cement and let that sit for a while. I almost always use my Dremel when kit bashing. It's an invaluable tool that every hobbyist should have. I've had both a cordless and a corded one, but both are effective for hobby use. I probably prefer the corded one though, since you never have to worry about whether it's charged or not. I use some thin wooden dowel to create an axle to hold the button wheels that I want to add to the Doom Diver chassis. I drill holes in both the dowel and the buttons so that I can pin them with some metal wire. When I am satisfied with how things are lining up, I glue them in place. To give the wheels a bit more detail, I use these spare Beastman shields. Next, I start lining up the rubber band of the slingshot ensuring there is enough room for my Goblin Doom Diver. Going back and forth between trimming and dry fitting, I figure out the length I need them to be. Once I have them at the correct size, I glue the two halves in place and to each other. If you don't have these ogre bits, don't worry. You can easily make a convincing elastic band from green stuff sculpting putty, which I will demonstrate. Since I only have 3 of these slingshot pieces, I'll need one anyway. First I mix equal parts blue and yellow putty until they are consistent green color. Then I take a wad of green stuff in my hand and, trying to match the thickness of the plastic piece, stretch the green stuff, although mostly off camera. By doing this, I was able to get something that pretty closely resembled the sling in a single attempt. I trim off the ends to recover some of the unused green stuff, but I'll leave the rest to fully cure before using it. I decide that I'm not loving the way the ramp meets the ladder, so I use some of the leftover green stuff to add a small metal bracket where the two components meet. I also use the leftover green stuff to fill in some gaps in my balsa wood. Balsa wood is a very soft material, and it's easy to accidentally damage it in unintended ways while working with it. While I wait for my green stuff to cure, I start working on some crew for my war machine, using leftover orc bits from various kits. I construct an orc bully holding a choppa and a whip. For the Goblin crew, I use the knobbler bodies that came with my bag of scrap launcher bits, and add some small goblin heads to them. Pretty much any goblin models could be used for crew though. Copying the old world model, I add a little hook to the side of the war machine. This holds the bucket of grease that the goblins use to reduce the friction on the ramp. I break for the evening once again, and when I return, the green stuff is ready to use. I trim the green stuff elastic bands to match the size of my plastic one, and after dry fitting, I glue them both in place. Since I already have some Goblin Diver models, I won't need to convert those, but with some plastic rod and green stuff, I don't think fabricating these wings would be too difficult. If you do attempt this, I'd love to see what you come up with. The old world model actually comes with 2 diver models, so you could definitely use the spare one to make a second Doom Diver unit if you already have one. The sprue glue is also ready to use, so I touch up the seams on the metal clasps. And since I am experimenting with this stuff, I decide to add some extra texture to the button wheels to give them a more rough and rustic look. My brother recently discovered this brand of superglue that comes with its own accelerant in an aerosol can. If you go through a lot of superglue like I do, the value is really great on these. I can't say enough good things about this accelerant spray. If you've never used a superglue accelerant, you should really try it. It will completely change the way you look at superglue. I can't seem to find this exact brand on Amazon anymore, so I've had to switch to another one. See my Amazon affiliate link in the show notes if you are interested in trying this stuff out. And here's why I use a lot of superglue. I prefer to use it when attaching sand and flock to my bases. I'll apply the glue directly from the bottle, and then using a coffee stir stick, toothpick, or piece of wire, I'll push the glue around until it covers the top of the base evenly. Then I just sprinkle sand over top of it, shake off the excess, and clean up the flat edges with my finger, and leave it to dry. I use the same method to add flock to the crew bases. And the Doom Divers are finished. You could definitely take this build a bit further and add even more details, including the little metal footholds on the ramp, or some grease, but I'm happy with how it looks right now. As insane as it sounds, I've literally been planning this conversion in my mind since 6th edition came out 25 years ago, so it feels good to finally do it. Scratch building Warhammer models can seem like a daunting task, but it's definitely rewarding to embrace it. Just remember, I built my first Chaos Chariot from popsicle sticks and sprue, so don't be afraid to try something new. This is Xander's Arcane Study. Thanks for watching.